Most of us, when we hear the name Pocahontas, picture the brave, beautiful Disney princess, singing with the colors of the wind, deeply in love with Captain John Smith. It's a story many of us grew up with, a tale of adventure and romance in the New World. But what if I told you that the story Disney presented, the one etched into our collective memory, is more fairy tale than fact? What if the real story of Pocahontas is far more complex, more heartbreaking, and ultimately more human than anything a Hollywood studio dared to show? Hello, and welcome. In this video, we're going to journey back to the early 17th century, to the shores of Virginia, to uncover the life of a young Native American woman caught between two worlds. We'll look beyond the animated songs and the fictional romance to understand who Pocahontas truly was. We'll explore her real name, her actual age when she met the English, the truth about her relationship with John Smith, and the significant life events Disney conveniently left out. By the end of this video, you'll have a much clearer picture of this pivotal figure in American history. Not as a cartoon character, but as a real person whose life was shaped by immense cultural collision and personal tragedy. We'll also touch upon why getting her story right matters, especially to the descendants of her people. Before we dive in, if you're interested in uncovering the hidden truths of history, especially stories from the Old West and Native American heritage, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on our future explorations. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. So, settle in as we unravel the real story of Pocahontas. Part 1. Who was she really? To begin, the name Pocahontas, by which the world knows her, wasn't even her formal given name. She was born around 1596, and her true name was Matoaka. According to the Mattaponi tribe's oral history, Matoaka means flower between two streams, a beautiful image likely referring to her birthplace between the Mattaponi and Pamunkey rivers. She also had another, more private name, Amonute. Pocahontas was actually a childhood nickname, meaning something like playful one or mischievous one in the Algonquian language. It's this nickname, recorded by the English, that has overshadowed her real identity for centuries. Matoaka, or Pocahontas, as we'll continue to call her for familiarity, was no ordinary girl. She was the daughter of Wahun Seneca, the paramount chief of the Powhatan Confederacy, a powerful alliance of over 30 Algonquian-speaking tribes that dominated the region we now know as Tidewater, Virginia. Her father, often referred to simply as Chief Powhatan by the English, was an immensely influential leader, ruling a vast territory called Senakamoko. While her father's status is well documented, less is known for certain about Pocahontas's mother. Some accounts suggest her mother, also named Pocahontas, may have died in childbirth. Mattaponi tradition also holds that her mother was Powhatan's first wife, and that Pocahontas was named for her. The English records of the time, often focused through a patriarchal lens, tell us little. Imagine this young girl, growing up in a thriving culture, learning the ways of her people, unaware of the seismic shifts that were about to occur with the arrival of strange ships from across the Great Water. Part 2. The English Arrive and the John Smith Myth. In May of 1607, the English colonists landed and established Jamestown. This marked a monumental turning point, not just for the Powhatan people, but for young Pocahontas herself. And here's a crucial detail Disney changed dramatically. At this time, Pocahontas was just a child. Not the young woman depicted in the film, but a young girl. Now, let's talk about Captain John Smith. The story of Pocahontas saving Smith from execution by her father is perhaps the most famous part of her legend. We've all seen the dramatic scene, But here's where history and myth collide. Smith's own account of this dramatic rescue, where he claimed Pocahontas threw herself over him to prevent her father from clubbing him to death, wasn't published until 1624, many years after Pocahontas had died, and long after the supposed event in 1607 or 1608. This delay has led many historians to question its accuracy, or even if it happened as he described. Think about it. A child, by Powhatan customs, intervening in a paramount chief's formal execution of a prisoner. It's highly unlikely she would have been allowed to do so, even if such an execution was taking place. Some historians suggest that what Smith interpreted as a near-death experience might have actually been a Powhatan ritual, perhaps an adoption ceremony designed to incorporate Smith, and by extension the English, into their world, or at least define his status. It's a fascinating possibility, one that paints a very different picture than a simple act of rescue. So, what about the passionate romance between Pocahontas and John Smith that Disney made central to its story? Well, that's almost certainly pure fiction. Remember, she was a child, and Smith was a grown man, a significant age difference. A romantic relationship, as depicted, is highly improbable and, frankly, disturbing by today's standards. While Pocahontas did interact with the Jamestown settlers, she was known to visit the fort, sometimes bringing food during desperate times of starvation for the colonists. Their relationship was likely one of curiosity, perhaps even a cautious friendship from her side, or viewed by Smith as a useful diplomatic connection. Some accounts even suggest Smith saw himself in more of a fatherly role to her. The passionate adult romance? That seems to be a later embellishment, a narrative that perhaps served to create a more palatable founding story for a new nation. The Disney movie shows John Smith leaving for England, gravely injured, with Pocahontas tearfully watching him go. Smith did leave Virginia in 1609 after being injured in a gunpowder explosion. They never saw each other again in America. Part 3. Life Beyond Smith. Kidnapping, Conversion, and a Different Marriage. Disney's story largely ends with John Smith's departure, but Pocahontas's life, her real life, continued, taking dramatic and often tragic turns. And these are parts of her story that Disney completely omitted or saved for a less popular direct-to-video sequel, which still took liberties. Around 1610, after Smith had left Virginia, Pocahontas married a Powhatan man named Kocoum. Yes, she was married before she ever encountered John Rolfe. This is a significant detail, often overlooked, highlighting that her life was rooted within her own culture. Some sources even suggest she had a child with Kocoum. This part of her life is entirely absent from the popular Disney narrative. Then, in 1613, a pivotal and traumatic event occurred. Pocahontas was captured. Captain Samuel Argall, an English captain, lured her onto his ship and took her hostage. She was around 17 years old at this time. The English hoped to use her as a bargaining chip, demanding ransom from her father, Chief Powhatan, the return of English prisoners, stolen weapons, and corn. Imagine the fear and confusion for this young woman, taken from her people and held captive by foreigners. This wasn't an adventure. It was a strategic act of colonial power. During her captivity, which lasted for over a year, Pocahontas was taken to an English settlement called Henricus. There, she was put under the tutelage of a minister named Alexander Whitaker, who instructed her in the Christian faith. She eventually converted to Christianity and was baptized, taking the English name Rebecca. It's important to consider the circumstances of this conversion. Was it a truly free choice, or was it a condition of her captivity, a means of survival, or a path to potentially easing relations and securing her release? The historical record suggests it was likely heavily influenced by her situation as a captive. Then, in 1614, while still effectively a prisoner of the English, Pocahontas, now Rebecca, married an English tobacco planter named John Rolfe. Rolfe is famous for introducing a successful strain of tobacco cultivation to Virginia, which became the colony's economic backbone. This marriage to John Rolfe was approved by the English governor, and eventually by her father, Chief Powhatan. It did usher in a period of relative peace between the colonists and the Powhatan Confederacy, often called the Peace of Pocahontas. But again, we must ask, how much choice did she truly have in this marriage, given her circumstances? These events, her marriage to Kocoum, her kidnapping, her forced conversion, and her marriage to John Rolfe, are critical parts of her story. They paint a picture of a young woman navigating incredibly difficult circumstances, a far cry from the free-spirited, decision-making heroine of the Disney film. These are the uncomfortable truths Disney largely avoided. Part 4. Journey to England and a Tragic End. In 1616, Pocahontas, now known as Rebecca Rolfe, along with her husband John Rolfe and their young son Thomas, embarked on a journey to England. This trip was financed by the Virginia Company of London. Why? Because they saw Pocahontas as a powerful symbol. She was paraded in English society as an Indian princess, a civilized savage. Her presence was used as propaganda to show that the native people could be tamed and converted, to encourage investment in the Virginia colony, and to prove the colony was a success. She was even presented to King James I and the royal court. Imagine her, a woman from the tidewater forests of Virginia, thrust into the bustling alien world of Jacobean England. We can only speculate on what she truly thought and felt during this time, so far from home. One poignant moment recorded is her reunion with John Smith in London. Accounts suggest it was a somewhat awkward and emotional meeting. Smith wrote that she was formal with him at first, even accusing him and her father of betraying her people. But her time in England, and indeed her life, was cut tragically short. In March 1617, as the Rolfes were preparing to sail back to Virginia, Pocahontas fell ill. She died in Gravesend, England, and was buried there, thousands of miles from her homeland. She was only about 20 or 21 years old. The exact cause of her death remains unknown. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, dysentery, even poisoning have all been suggested by historians. What is certain is that her untimely death was a tragic end to a life lived at the turbulent crossroads of two vastly different cultures. Part 5. Disney versus reality. What they changed and why. So, now that we know more about the historical Pocahontas, let's directly compare her life to the 1995 Disney film. The differences are stark. Her age. Disney portrayed Pocahontas as a young adult, probably in her late teens or early 20s, old enough for a mature romance with John Smith. The reality? She was a child when they first met. This alteration was clearly made to make the romantic storyline palatable. Relationship with John Smith. In the film, it's the central love story. Historically, as we've discussed, there's no evidence of a romance. He was almost 2 decades older, and their interactions were far more complex than a simple love affair. The Saving Smith scene. Disney makes this the dramatic climax, where Pocahontas single-handedly prevents war by defying her father. Historically, the event itself is debated, and her role as a child intervening in such a manner is highly unlikely. Marriage. Disney's first film focuses entirely on her supposed romance with Smith. Her actual first marriage to the Powhatan man Kocoum is completely ignored. Her later marriage to John Rolfe, a cornerstone of the Peace of Pocahontas, only appears in the less famous sequel, and even then, its complexities are glossed over. Her kidnapping and conversion. These traumatic and transformative events in Pocahontas's life, being taken hostage, held for over a year, and converting to Christianity under duress, are nowhere to be found in the original Disney movie. These are uncomfortable truths that don't fit a simplified, heroic narrative. Native American culture. While visually stunning, Disney's depiction of Powhatan culture and spirituality often fell into generic stereotypes or inaccuracies. It simplifies complex traditions and can perpetuate the noble savage trope, glossing over the immense hardships and injustices the Powhatan people faced with colonization. Why did Disney make these significant changes? Primarily for entertainment and to create a compelling, marketable story for a family audience. A tragic tale of a kidnapped child bride forced into a new religion and dying young far from home doesn't make for an uplifting animated musical. But in prioritizing romance and adventure over historical fact, a very different story was told, one that overshadows the complex and often painful reality. Part 6. The impact of the myth and native perspectives. Does it really matter if a children's movie from decades ago got the story wrong? For many, especially for Native American communities and descendants of the Powhatan people, it matters a great deal. The Powhatan Lenape Nation, among others, has been critical of Disney's portrayal. They argue that the romanticized version effectively erases the tragic reality of Pocahontas's life, her suffering, her losses, and the brutal context of colonization. When a fictional story becomes the dominant narrative, it can be incredibly damaging. Scholars point out that such inaccuracies and stereotypes can contribute to misconceptions about indigenous peoples and their histories. They can impact how Native youth see themselves and how the wider world views their heritage. The focus on a non-existent romance completely overshadows the historical trauma, the land loss, the cultural destruction, and the violence that were part of early English colonization, a context essential for understanding Pocahontas's life and the history of this nation. There's a growing movement to reevaluate Pocahontas's story from indigenous perspectives, to move beyond the colonial narratives that have shaped her image for so long. This means listening to oral traditions, engaging with indigenous scholarship, and striving to honor her as a real person who showed strength and resilience in unimaginably difficult circumstances. She was a bridge, sometimes by choice, often by force, between two colliding worlds. The real story of Pocahontas, or Matoaka, is not the simple fairy tale Disney told us. She was a daughter, a sister, a wife twice over, a mother. She was a member of a proud and powerful nation whose world was irrevocably changed by the arrival of Europeans. Her life was short and marked by profound upheaval, from her childhood interactions with the Jamestown settlers to her debated role with John Smith, her first marriage, her kidnapping, her forced conversion, her marriage to John Rolfe, her journey to a foreign land, and her untimely death. Her true legacy isn't found in a love song from an animated movie. It's in the complex, often uncomfortable history of early America, reflecting both moments of interaction and the harsh realities of exploitation. Remembering Pocahontas accurately means looking beyond the myth. It means acknowledging the full scope of her experiences, the good, the bad, and the heartbreaking, all within the profound context of colonization and its devastating impact on indigenous peoples. Thank you for joining us on this journey to uncover the real story of Pocahontas. We encourage you to seek out more information from reliable historical sources and native perspectives. If you found this video insightful, please consider sharing it, so others too can learn about the remarkable young woman behind the legend. What are your thoughts on Pocahontas's real story versus the Disney version? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the fascinating pages of history.